Georgia, LSU, SEC championship game. The first game that I ever went to, first SEC championship game I ever attended, was LSU, Georgia. Nick Saban was the head coach at LSU. It was Mark Richt at Georgia. It was 03, and I believe the final was 34-13, which is right in line with how a lot of people are predicting this game to go. Brian Kelly's the first head coach since Jim McElwain to be in the SEC championship game in his first season as head coach in this conference. Do you know what this confirms? Georgia opened as like they're a 17.5 point favorite right now. They have been double-digit favorites in every game this year. That is not easy to do, even with the schedule they play. It's not easy to do. What does Saturday mean for the SEC championship game? Well, I don't really know. A lot of you were asking, like, what does it mean? Is it going to be boring? Does this kind of water down the quality of the game? Look, I don't know if you've noticed, there is no pristine conference championship game. I would argue the closest thing to that's the Big 12 championship game. It's competition, man. Point spreads don't matter once you kick a game off. It's competition. I would welcome some of you to walk out of the Xbox world, walk into the real world. Hey, this team in purple and gold was favored by double digits last week, and they got run out of someone else's building. Who knows? I will ask you this rhetorically as we get into the prediction. Do you think the A&M game matters? A lot of you have been very turned off by that game, obviously. A&M kind of took the wood to LSU last Saturday. Do you think it matters this week? Cook on that. Let's dive into the game. Can the upset happen? It's always our rule here. We will not break a game down if we don't think the upset can happen. Yeah, there's a non-0% chance that the upset could happen. So how does it happen? Well, number one, the LSU defense, I think, is the most important factor in this game because they got to keep LSU in it. And it's possible. It is possible. This is a very, very efficient Georgia offense, but you can slow it down. Okay? It's not Caleb Williams out there at his peak. It's not just scissoring you up and down the field and you have no recourse. It can happen. How would it happen? Well, number one, you have to take advantage of one of the relative weaknesses in Georgia's arsenal this year, and that is they've been turnover prone. I think they're in like the 70s or 80s nationally in turnover margin. And I also think that lends to the style of play that Georgia likes to incorporate. Think about the Tennessee game. Once they got up in the Tennessee game, Kirby Smart rightly realized the only way they could beat us is if we help them do it at this point. There could be a time in this game where Kirby realizes they're not moving the ball on us at all. The only way that we could really lose this thing is if we throw the ball and we give them an opportunity to force turnovers. Well, the best way to counter that is make sure that you're very aggressive and, the Harold Perkins of the world are a factor. You're forcing the pocket, you're forcing early throws, and you're putting yourself in position to force some turnovers before it's 24-3. Because at that point, it's going to be a very, very quick game. You're out of there in about 3 hours and 15 minutes. The second thing is Jaden Daniels has to be athletically healthy. I think he's going to start. For those unfamiliar, there are health concerns with him, the quarterback at LSU. He's got to be athletically healthy. I don't care if he's on the field if I don't get his legs. He is a very ineffective weapon if I don't have his legs to work with. And he is at that point a detriment to LSU's success opportunities. He's not part of that equation anymore. So he's got to have, number one, the ability to use every facet of his game. And number two, he's got to have a timing and precision day. He's got to have one of those days where you watch it, you know him, you've watched every game if you're an LSU fan. It's just got to be one of those afternoons where he's making some throws he hasn't made all year, capable of them, but hadn't really made them. He's anticipating windows opening instead of waiting for the windows to open, which is one of the big gripes, thankful gripes. People are thankful for him, but one of the gripes, if you pick apart his game, is he's not able to anticipate. He's just half a second behind on some of these throws. Half a second's a long time on a football field when pass routes are developing downfield. Here's the other, ray of sunshine, ray of hope for LSU. Georgia does not generate a ton of sacks. They don't generate a ton of pressure. Now, ton of tackles for loss. I would counter that. And I would say when they needed to against Tennessee, they did. And I'm not so sure if they needed it Saturday, if they couldn't take those two stats I just read you and sort of render them moot. I think Georgia could probably record a few more sacks in a given season if they need to. I think they could record a few more tackles for loss. They don't need to because they know they got the best red zone defense in the country. And so they know we don't really think you're going to move it much between the 20s. But even if you do, once you get down here, hope for 3. 3 is as good as you're going to do. And that kind of brings me to my next point. And this sounds easy to say. It's much harder to execute. When LSU gets around midfield, when they get across midfield and plus territory, that's where you've got to score. I'm not saying you can't do it in the red zone, but popping explosive plays, which is extremely hard against Georgia, but you're a 17.5-point dog for a reason. Popping explosive plays, taking shots around midfield, that's your shot. You don't have to wait to get in the red zone before you try and crack the end zone. You can try and pop some explosive plays, and look, that would be great. There are a lot of concerns for LSU, but one of them to me is just worried about how much gas they have in the tank. It's hard to make it this deep in the season. And they've obviously been banged up at quarterback. They're banged up. Special teams is always a concern. You've watched LSU this year. They are what they are. You hope in the randomized nature of special teams, it doesn't bite you in a game like this, but it could. It's there. It's a reality. And the passing game. It's something I can't get away from. You've got to have it. You can't be one-dimensional against Georgia. You just can't. So let's take a look at what the model thinks. Let's take a look at what Vegas says. The current line, Georgia minus 17.5. We've only got Georgia minus 13.5 with the model, but I do need to make sure that I emphasize that's with a totally healthy Jaden Daniels. So we have not knocked LSU at all. We have not shaved any points off or given any points in favor to Georgia. So the way I see this playing out is the type of game where either LSU has a little firecracker start, but Georgia ends up taking control, or Georgia just takes control early, but in typical Georgia fashion, we've seen it many times this year, they just don't stretch the game in the second half. They have no incentive to. They don't need style points. They're just looking to shorten it as quickly as possible, get it over with as quickly as possible. Now, if the spread were 7.5, I wouldn't care. But it's 17.5, so I do. And so I'm going to take Georgia to win. I do think it's a few too many points. I'll take LSU to cover. It would be the weirdest thing in the world. And I don't know if anticlimactic's the right word. How weird, I guess that's the right word, would it feel if you watched purple and gold confetti raining in Atlanta? Because LSU's not going to the playoff. Georgia's still going to the playoff. This just feel weird. It's the second year in a row, by the way. Georgia would have missed out on winning the conference, and they're still going to the playoff. I don't know. I don't think it'll happen, but we'll see. Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure and leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.